Hello, my name is Adam, and welcome to Tell Me About Your Game, the podcast where I invite people on to tell me about their tabletop RPG games, their sessions, their campaigns, their characters, their homebrewed worlds. We're talking D&D, Pathfinder, Fate, Powered by the Apocalypse game, Starfinder, and many others. These people are not celebrities or big industry insiders, they're just people who love a game. If you're playing it, I want to hear about it, and if you clicked on this podcast, maybe you want to hear about them too.
He is the ancient. He is the land. In just 7 days, he can make you a man. I sat down with Shane of infntealchemics in a special Halloween interview to talk about his very special Rocky Horror Curse of Strahd. I see you shiver with
I am here with Shane. Shane, would you mind introducing yourself, saying a few things about yourself and about your excellent your world that you've told me a little bit about?
Yeah, hello there, world. My name is Shane. I go by Infinite Alchemics on most audio platforms and Twitter and other social media accounts. But generally speaking, I'm an artificer who makes jewelry and other such whimsical things for TTRPGs, and I also run a very interesting version of Curse of Strahd currently that is based off of Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I'm here today to talk about it with you. So, well, with Adam and everyone else who wants to hear.
Yeah, and I'm so appreciative of you doing this too, because I heard that when I made the initial post, the initial pitch for this podcast, and I was like, oh, that sounds a bit like a Halloween episode. So this is probably going to be going out October 27th is what I'm kind of expecting.
That is a
But
perfect and exciting release date. I look forward to it. And by then, most likely my players will be through a lot of the content I can talk about. So I'm very excited to kind of even skip ahead and be able to give some reveals here. So I'm pumped.
If you're comfortable with that, do not talk about anything that you are not comfortable with, especially if you've got some players with prying ears here.
Oh, not at all. And I don't mind if my players have prying ears. I am very lucky to have a group of dudes who I have known for a long time, and they do not struggle with differentiating what their characters know and what they know as players. So
That's
that does
good.
help a lot. They're pretty trustworthy people.
Honestly, if you go around metagaming and so on, you're really only selling yourself short there. You're really only kind of ruining it for yourself. I like the experience of having my character find things out as though they were a real character, a real person who is figuring things out real time. And oh
Absolutely. I
yes,
also do appreciate players understanding like how to metagame maybe responsibly or like wait to return. I think the good old adage is like I think about trolls. Like if a player were to come along a troll, and yeah, most players already know that trolls are weak to fire, and that if you
hmm
use fire on them, they don't regenerate, which is very important. But if their character doesn't know, I've had players who will just be like, they'll wait until someone uses a fire spell and then they'll say out loud, wow, it doesn't look like it's regenerating or and I'm totally okay with that.
yeah, waiting for an excuse in world, and I appreciate people who are willing to do that. It's less of a game and more of an experience in that fashion. Otherwise, just go play
Well,
Minecraft because you already know how to defeat creepers.
I have to think that way because here's the thing. Even though I run a Curse of Strahd campaign right now, I one day really want to be in a Curse of Strahd campaign, and it's going to
hmm
be tough since I know the whole campaign forward and backwards because I've read it over and over and over. So there's no way I won't be able to meta a little bit, but it's just going to have to be that differentiation once again, that separation of what I know, what my character knows, and what I am capable of revealing based on only what my character knows. And I get that.
And of course, you're benefited by the fact that no two playthroughs of a given module are ever the same. You're always going to have
No,
the
absolutely.
dungeon master is going to be trying something different, especially if they know that you've been through it before. They'll probably want to put in some surprises for you,
Oh,
which is
absolutely.
going to give you pause if you get even the slightest temptation to metagame in that way. And of course, the worlds they grow and they react to the things that the players do. It's never the same experience
A
twice.
wise DM once told me, he says, the rule books and everything else, all of the modules, they are just suggestions, not law. So treat them as suggestions. And I have lived by that pretty much my entire DM career, which is, oh yeah, this is just kind of what's there. I can do whatever the hell I want with it. And it's played out very well.
Be more what you call guidelines than actual
Yeah,
rules.
absolutely, absolutely.
So, I am then to presume that you are something of a fan of Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah, it's something that I've loved since I was very young. I've had the lovely opportunity of seeing it come through like my local town. I live in the Twin Cities of Minnesota, so I got to see it like a live play version of it. Here, I've seen the actual like, movie as a kid and fell in love with the musical aspect and like the weird macabreness of it back then. And then also in my early 20s, I was in New York City and got to see an actual like New York play like version of it where you're going into the movie theater, watching the movie theater with people who people are acting it out on the front of the screen. You're
Mhm.
yelling it out and you're throwing all the things, and it's that part of that like where that originally began.
All the in jokes, the shadow play. I have
Yeah, exactly.
I myself saw that in none other than Salem, Massachusetts. As it was the first time I went and I saw a shadow play of it. It was it was a lot of fun.
It's invigorating and it's consuming. Like you experience it and it's something that you just get wild up in, and it's very fun, and it's something I will never forget. And there's something that comes along with that show that is so, how do you say, it's creepy without being creepy, but it's maddening without being mad, and it's not depressing in most ways, even though a lot of the themes are sad, scary, and very weird. And that is a feeling that I've really, really wanted to bring to Curse of Strahd. And it came to me with this one revelation of just thinking one day, like, well, I'm reading through Curse of Strahd. I was planning on running it very much like the Baroque and macabre dark horror that is Curse of Strahd. It's supposed to be depressing. It's supposed to be scary and kind of
Mhm.
unnerving. But well, it was the beginning of COVID-1, so
Oh god.
I wasn't feeling like everyone needed depressing in that moment. I kind of wanted to go off the bounds. So I was like, well, what if Tim Curry played Strahd? And then I was like, well, what if? And I was like, well, that would be my favorite Strahd because it'd be like he has the attitude, he has the pizzazz, he has, it's that Professor Frankenfurter that I'm in charge, I'm out of this world, you don't understand me, even though I'm easy kind of to understand, even though I'm the sexual, loving, huge being, like this, I don't know what to call it other than like Austin Powers esque energy of like, look at me, like I was like, Strahd, that's perfect for Strahd. He's a man who has whatever he wants. And if we're talking about Gothic time frame, like people were very, like there was an aristocracy and like higher up in certain parts of the world, not just England. Like if you look at France at the time, it's very sexual. It's not like the
Oh god,
very
yeah. Yep.
gothic and dark and prudent time period that was England at the same time. And so, that's kind of where I got this basis from. And then I started, jumping into my other favorite types of media that kind of go along with that. And I think the one most people are common, like find most common with or can also relate to would be what is it called? Little Shop of Horror. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
that sort of campy horror where it's kinda serious, but also kinda not serious.
I think campy horror is a great way to describe what I'm trying to do here, which is
Mhm.
really open up Curse of Strahd to that. It's honestly was for my benefit as well. I think getting it lighter and making it more accessible to my players and more pop cultural and referential it's made it more fun. And I've also been able to weave in still these very dark tropes and still these very hardcore moral choices, which is kind of what I focus on. But I think my main focus, though, when I first started approaching this was how do I replace this gothic, depressive horror situation that is Curse of Strahd and kind of change the depressing to either more of a manic, like heightened sense of purpose or like emotions, or more of a madness. And I think a good reference to anyone who's played the Elder Scroll games is if you ever played Oblivion, there was an expansion called the Shivering Isles where it was literally cut in half. Half was madness, half was I think manicness or like loving, like just over the top happiness. And it was a perfect blend of just weird, creepy without being depressing. And so I've kind of modeled a lot of that. And I started with just taking NBCs I started taking and really diving into who they were as characters, like what their motivation is emotionally, and then
Hmm.
taking that emotion and ramping it up. So, a good example is in Barovia. In the first part of this platform, we have I think Father Detarius, or it's one of the churchgoers, or it's the head of the church in the
Oh
town
boy.
of Barovia. He has his son trapped in the basement, who has been turned into a vampire spawn by Strahd, and he just sits down there tormenting his father about like how it's his fault for him being a vampire, and basically, classic like, oh, my vampire son's in the basement and I don't know what to do about it.
Minor interjection. I think it's Father Lucian.
Father Lucian, and thank you, that's it. I appreciate that. It's been a while since I've been in Barovia. We've been in a little farther into the campaign. No, first thing I did was take Father Lucian, and the biggest thing is that he's a holy, pious man who just believes in the power of the Morning Lord. And so I kind of was like, okay, well, how do we take him from this depressing, like being cursed by his son, to making him more mad? And so I made him just obsessed with only one thing, and that is his with the Morning Lord itself. So he was just preaching to just this higher power, but then also just made him filthy. I made it so that he was so obsessed, and like we're talking like covered, like I described him as the players entered the church as I have a Loxodon who has advantage, a player who has advantage on, smell checks. So it's like the first thing that hits your character especially is the smell of human feces. And then they look at this man in his white robes, but they're not white. They're like brown and covered in garbage dirt and just like crap. And he's just like, he thinks that the voice of his son is in his head. And I have just Father Lucian be just this mad snapped gentleman who just, he's all there, and he just keeps popping into like this church father role where he's like very proper, and he's like, welcome my children, and just disregards, like the wears no clothes kind of thing. He doesn't see what he's wearing, he doesn't notice any of it. And he's coming at my players with, oh, welcome to the church, how can I do that? But anytime I had his son yell up through the grating, like through, the feeding part of the floor, I'd have him re-snap into his insanity, throw like his own feces down to feed his son, and just yell like, get out of my head, and then snap right back into it. And it was at that point my players were unnerved. They're like, what in the world is wrong with him? And ever since then, it's just been a downhill battle for them, as they've just, or has been, oh, I guess, uphill battle, as it's just been crazier moment after crazier moment. They have all had dream pies. They have all sunk into Morgana. It's like they've met her and believe her. And I've given them all different dreams from different, my dark powers I've decided are demon lords in my campaign. So that's been super fun. But
Okay.
I'll get to that in a little bit,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
just to
yeah.
keep on,
It's easy to get ahead of ourselves
no,
in this when you're talking about an entire complex world.
No, absolutely. But to get back to it, like that's an example of just trying to zero in on an NPC and then boosting up their character flaws or what makes them them,
Just
and or just amping up their motivation.
turning
And
the knobs to 11 to
yes,
generate more that campy drama.
yeah. So having Father Lucian beg for them not to kill his son, and like my players used up they're very charismatic. I have 5 players in total. They're very mixed. Like I have, let's see, wild magic sorcerer, so that's a charisma based. I have
Uh-huh.
a uh let's see, we have a bard who's charisma based. We have
Yes, you
a
gotta have a bard. You gotta
yeah,
have a bard in that
yeah.
world.
We have a cleric who is pretty charisma based as well, and a few other, like, yeah, he's really charisma heavy, surprisingly. And just we have so many. We think we have 4 faces for a party of 5, and then one of them's even a heavy. And so they're really well balanced, and they're very good at talking their way into and like through situations. So I need these NPCs to kind of be a little unnerved and hard to communicate with, because these guys roll so well, and because their characters are based on talking, but sometimes there are situations that don't need to be talked to. So a good example, like of something that I changed in from the very beginning, was right after the Father Lucian situation. Of course, like to leave Barovia, you meet Irina and you meet her brother, and they want you to bury her father, the burgomaster who has died, right? They're being tormented. So have Irina being this peppy, very headstrong young lady who isn't afraid of anything and is very headbutting towards the players, just like, it's a woman's world. I can do whatever I want and I can make it
Mhm,
happen. Very
mhm.
strong character. Really love her. I have her brother, who is just, he's the head patriarch of the family. He's expected to be the burgomaster, but I have him very much like lost puppy dog. So they have the players bury his father. And I figured that was my point to introduce the players to Strahd and how, in the book, they're supposed to have the sunrise funeral for the module. It's supposed to be kind of this dour moment and nothing happens of it. Well, I decided that's when Strahd would show up to show his respect. So I had him come in as like a Louisiana, like the what are they called? Like a horn march where they actually
Mhm.
have like so I played, I had the very like heavy horn music of like this whole entire swing band playing these funeral dirges as Strahd comes in on the back of his, his black horsed chariot and whatnot, and like his minions are all on the headstones, and he has a ton of undead with him. And I had him do this big old speech towards the burgomaster that was super tongue in cheek. And I played it very much Frankenfurter, like with the music coming into it. But the way that I played it different was in I had all of the dead leave flowers on top of the burgomaster's grave and Father Lucien's son. Um, because the players did end up killing him, which was this whole
Mhm.
hullabaloo, and they had to like try and charm the father into like understanding, but really they left that whole situation a mess. But so the father, he dug the graves. They're all down there. They're about to do all the ceremony. Strahd comes in, and I have all of the mourners turn out to be undead with swords who then start to kill themselves. Like they start to battle one another and pile their bodies on top of the flowers. And my players are now in combat they're trying to fight these zombies because they're like, okay, got to fight these zombies. But then the zombies are now fighting themselves. And when their bodies finally drop, I had the flowers erupt into a corpse flower, and now it's a giant corpse flower fight.
Whoa!
And so,
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it should be the first impression of Rocky Horror. I remember the first time I watched it, I was probably in my early teens, was definitely WTF, and that was
yeah.
it's gotta be a little that's WTF right there, if ever I've seen it.
Yes, and because the corpse flower uses the corpses that it consumes as puppets, so I have to have the burgomaster's body almost become one, even though I think one of my clerics did like Repose of the Dead or one of the spells that like preserves
Gentle
the dead
repose?
body. Yeah,
Yeah.
gentle repose on the burgomaster. So I actually had the corpse flower fail in making him. But Doru, his son, or Lucian's son Doru, oh, he came back as a zombie, and like now the players have to kill him twice, kind of thing, in front of Lucian, and it's this huge moral moment of them just understanding, like Strahd. Oh yeah, he made this beautiful speech, but really was he here to test us, to fuck with us, or to mess with us?
Or is this what he
Um,
considers to be paying his respects?
well, paying his respect to the burgomaster, but then also he has let in these new people into his realm. And I don't know about you, but when I think of Frankenfurter, he's a very driven man who has his own goals, but he's also bored and into messing with things that don't want to be messed with. The whole theme of Rocky Horror is you have straight-laced Brad and Janet, and they're just being,
Mhm.
he derives pleasure in playing with people. And I think that's pretty true with the real Strahd, not just like my weird version of it.
It absolutely is. Mhm.
And if you ramp that up, that means it says in the book, in all the information, Strahd has the power to invite people in and not let, play with them and have them around to do whatever bidding he wants or for him to manipulate her. Because it's been 400 years. No one's ever been successful in killing him. And even the ones who've come close, he just always comes back. Strahd's cocky. He's brilliant. He's lost in his own weird goals, but he's cocky when it comes to inviting in prey, especially adventurers who are low level when they get to Barovia. And so my characters came in under the impression of moving into the Death House. I completely skipped Death House. I honestly find it as a worthless part of the campaign. I think it's very dungeon tread. It's slow. It starts off the campaign slow. So I gave the players the entire thing completely already cleared out as a moving gift, and it came to, I think, Marbard's mother or aunt. It got a letter in the mail that said, "Hey, you inherited this property. You need to come and claim it," kind of situation. So they show up. They find this small town. Find some Vistani in a local town that are like, "Oh yeah, we know how to get to Barovia." They get taken through the fog, and now him and his moving company are the ones who are stuck there, and that's their whole premise. They're a moving company, which I find hilarious
That
and
is funny.
wonderful. What is it? Two Loxodons and a sun, or like it's Loxodon and Sons Company or something like that. It's a pretty funny little group, and they work really well together. But either way, just Strahd is cocky about them. So to have them in there and to be constantly messing with them is something that it's a side project, right? Like it's not his main hustle, but it's the thing that he brings in. Um, the players down the line actually, I had a problem with them kind of starting to feel that they're too special. I don't know how to explain that. Where do you ever have players where they get the idea that they are the destined, they are the chosen one. They get that feeling of they have to follow all of these MacGuffins because they're destined to defeat Strahd or whatever. Well, that's not the case in this module.
Hmm.
Like, realistically. So I had in the second town, Wallachia, I have a whole bar filled with adventurers who have died, who have been part of parties. They've all met Madame Eva. They've all gotten these, visions of how to defeat him, and they're the ones.
Oh, that's a fantastic way to handle that.
And so they're all at the bar and they're all laughing. They're like, these, and they're called the amusers. The local call them the amusers because Strahd brings them in to amuse them. And he's sitting, so all these, adventurers are like, talk to Wee Willie. And Wee Willie's like, yeah, I was brought in 2 years ago. I came in with my party of six. I'm the only one left. We lost a Tall John last week. We lost Tall John about 6 months ago to wolves, but I'm happy to be here and happy to be alive. And he's like, oh yeah, I remember my Madame Eva, like, I guess she gave me her things. What'd she say? And he repeats off one of the cards, kind of thing. And he goes, a lot of bullshit that was like. And my players are instantly like, what do you mean these people are here? I'm like, yeah, they also got that stuff. And like, they've also had this. Like, you're not special. You're here because Strahd wants you to be here. And if you try and fight, if you want to follow these prophecies and maybe make it happen, then go for it. But if you want to do something else, you can also do that. What will your character do? What are they going to try and do? Which rumors are they going to listen to? And which things are they going to do? And that's how I keep it fun for myself, is while I create very whimsical and fun, topical and referential content for my players. What makes it fun for me is the gears behind the scene turning, what deeds they don't tackle, so I can decide what happens when they decide not to deal with something, and all of the different cogs that intertwine even when they don't see them. I love the background noise that is
Mhm.
always turning and moving in my games. I play very dynamic worlds. I think that's what makes D&D different than any other game out there, or any, well, TTRPGs in general, is that like, it's a real world, so you can bring in real world implications. If the players decide to do A instead of B, well, B still needed help, and that's still going to happen, and now it's going to happen without the players, and the destiny is different, because, or the outcome is going to be very, very different, because there aren't people to maybe intervene. And what implications that has when the players get back to that area, I make very obvious. And I think it's like one of the only ways to really play COS is to make it not feel like a module sandbox video game, is to really bring in, how are you affecting this world?
These
How are
things are
you affecting?
happening. They're gonna keep happening no matter what you're doing. So you gotta make it good. It adds to his feeling of desperation because, you're not out in the wilderness collecting wildflowers for a side quest while the main storyline is causing the entire end of the world. You gotta put those flowers down, you
Oh,
know?
absolutely. It's also a closed economy. Barovia is stuck inside the
Mm.
fog. The only new wealth that is ever bringing in is that from the Vistani and that from new adventurers. So that means there are a ton of food insecurities, especially liquor insecurities. That's a huge part of the whole module. There's a lack of stuff to go around, but everyone kind of wants it. Like, there are at least 4 or 5 different people that want wine in, like, there's multiple towns that want wine, but there's only one winery, and if you don't help them, things go really bad for the rest of the entire region, not just one town. And I think, like, I do like that way that Strahd was written. I think there are a lot of things in Curse of Strahd that are very dated and don't feel that great to play, and
Mm.
I don't think players really enjoy playing it through. So I'm a big proponent of, if it's boring and not fun, fix it.
Yeah, if it doesn't serve, toss it in the soup and do the next thing. Yeah, it's there's entire major supplements up on DM's Guild that are entirely about rewriting some of the rougher patches, some of the more boring or more offensive parts of Curse of Strahd.
Absolutely. It's Some of it is downright offensive, and I mean, other parts of it is just badly written. A good example is Yester Hill. There is a portion of Curse of Strahd where you are down in the southeast corner or southwest corner of the map, and there's this large hill with stones around it, and lightning is thundering down from the skies, hitting the stones, and there's this large Strahd effigy, and there's these druids doing this chant where they're trying to summon Strahd, and in 10 rounds, if they make it through their chant, they actually summon this giant, like, colossus tree beast known as Winter Splinter. It's pretty iconic. It
Hmm.
sounds really cool. The whole Yester Hill is a pretty it's an okay area. The problem is the map that is given to you is every square is 50 feet. So they give you this huge blown up map with nothing close up. You have to supplement it with something else. Also, the whole 10 rounds, I don't know how many combats many people play, but combats don't go 10 rounds generally speaking, versus especially like if it's just versus like 7 druids or things like that. And I don't like the idea of like, oh yeah, you start at the bottom of the hill and it takes you 8 rounds to get to the top of the hill during their chanting, and then you have 2 rounds in combat before they summon Winter Splinter. Ugh, it's boring.
You have to have like a really business-like group to even be able to make through 10 rounds in a comfortable amount of time.
Absolutely. And so I scrapped the entire Yester Hill everything, and I started from the base of and I started one from how can we make this a little sillier and a little bit more fun, a little bit more pop culture, and a little bit more like entertaining for both me and my players. And where I landed is actually surprisingly enough because I thought about it. Okay, I have a hill, this big precipice. I'm supposed to have druids and berserkers who have gathered from all over the woods to this large ceremony. It's basically a big party. Okay, it's an outdoor party. It's kind of rednecky. What am I going to do here? And so I made it the WSWF, which is the Winter Splinter Wrestling Federation. And
That's so
I
good.
and I rewrote the whole part of the module to be part of like wrestling themed. And so first, I got to do silly druid names. So I have Vince McMoon instead of Vince McMahon as like as the
Oh.
main druid. So he's now the arch druid in charge of things. I have his two assistants being these like they change into saber-tooth tiger, and like I have him in like leopard print animal suit. And then I have instead of the 10 round ceremony, what I decided was, well, Winter Splinter is going to be a yearly activity where all these druids and berserkers come together and they do this big fake ritual to summon Winter Splinter, right? This giant colossus thing, and that they burn every year. Well, this year they got the gem from the Wizard of Winery. So this year it's going to work. But the rituals always stayed the same. And so what my ritual was is I put a wrestling match at the top of the hill inside the ring of stones. I had they had I think the map itself has these little like Stonehenge type pillars, essentially, two stones with one on top of it. So I had them have magic runes on it that allowed the person standing on the center one is allowed to project their voice in the image that they can see up into the sky. So that way all the people, all the druids, all the blights, all of these berserkers that are watching this event are going to be able to see this big hologram in the sky, kind of like, a big wrestling event essentially. So now we have a point of interest where the players can interrupt. Anyone standing on this can project and control the narrative. I put the wrestling match there, and the spell, instead of doing 10 rounds, what I decided was it was going to be a 5v5 wrestling match, and the berserker between berserkers, and the berserkers that are fighting, you give them good names like professional wrestlers. So I changed them around. I had Macho Man Rabid Savage. I had the boulder instead of like the rock. I had one which we'll get to what my characters and what my players ended up doing with it, but and a few others in there. And then the whole goal was they would fight, and when they died, they would take their heads, they would chop off their opponent's head and put it on a spike at the corner of the ring.
Ooh.
And when the head goes on the spike, energy flies to Winter Splinter's statue. And when all 5 of the spikes have been blessed, that's when the creature's summoned. So my characters are outside of town. We're outside of the hill. There's 5 of them. They don't know how to get in there. They're like, I asked them, I'm like, you guys are hiding in the bushes. Like, what do you want to do? And they're like, well, what if we can sneak in? So, of course, I'm like, all right, yeah, you can sneak in. You see coming down the road, like, you want to try and sneak in after waiting an hour. You see a group of like 5 people coming down. They're very similar to your build. There's one very large guy. There's 2 little small. I just gave them, they chuckled about it. But they ended up doing the good old fashioned, like, tie them up and steal their clothing. So now they're blending in. And then
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, well, I have a Loxodon character who's huge, huge. So I'm like, okay, well, one of these guys definitely had to have been one of the wrestlers. So I'm like, yeah, you notice that one of these guys is he has like a belt, like, I describe him as such, and his name is Eddie Grotto. So now I have my party has decided that they are going to mar Our paladin is going to be the main wrestler, and they're all going to be his hype crew and his manager, and the like my bard is going to do a Bugs Bunny and like disguise himself as a card lady kind of situation. And they so I'm like, yeah, you guys okay. And so they slowly like bluff their way into this situation. They get to the hill and then they're like, hey, look, it's Eddie Grotto, and they're hyping up our paladin. And the paladin is like, yeah, look at me, I'm this professional wrestler. So now they have a huge wave of people pushing them all the way up to the ceremony. And then they get to the ceremony and they're introduced to the rules of the fight, and they get whirlwinded and swept up into this whole situation. But they very quickly forget they don't want this to happen. They forget that they are part of they are in the middle of they are literal components of a ritual to summon this thing. And it was like after the fourth person was killed or the third person was killed, they're like, hold one of my players was like, hold on a minute, like wait, guys, do we want this to be happening?
It's so weird how that happens in games. You start them off with a full, perfect understanding. We cannot, under any circumstances, allow this to happen. And then, if they find they're enjoying themselves, they forget for a moment that they're serious adventurers because the players are actually there to have a good time and do the most fun thing that they can think to do.
No, absolutely. And that's very much how my friends and people are playing for this. They want to have fun. They want to enjoy themselves. We're not here to have a serious Lord of the Rings drama. Like it has to be light. And I learned that fast with these guys. Like I
Mhm.
can't they tried playing serious, it didn't work out.
It varies from group to group very much, but I think also to your point earlier, where you were operating at the beginning of the pandemic, as you said,
Yeah.
I think we all probably had enough of the doom and gloom at that point. That's
Yeah,
probably
absolutely.
universal. Anyway,
So
sorry, continue.
no, absolutely. So this wrestling match continues, and realistically, I had it once they got down to two fighters. Our Loxodon player, of course, he kicked butt. He did great, and I had the mechanic. I had good mechanics going during the wrestling match where every time the lot my our wrestler had his turn. Right after him, I had all of the players, if they wanted to, could make deception rolls and do other stuff. Like they could support with by being deceptive. Like if they want to cast a spell secretly without the other teams, like because all the other wrestlers had support teams. They all had druids who were doing bark skin on them, and it was this whole hullabaloo. There's like 20 people around. And anytime my players they could have cast a fireball and blown up the Winter Splinter statue. They could have gone, they could have gone Nova and just said, throw a Molotov and let's blow things up. We're not letting this happen. But they never did. And they were super careful about like being deceptive because they're like, well, we don't want to be seen. And all I was sitting there is thinking of, well, what happens if you get seen? Who cares? What's gonna happen? Like, what's gonna happen? Like, you're in the middle of this ritual, do it. But they they keep playing along. I have it down to two people. We have them stop for, wrestling intermission. One of the bards in our group wanted to change his character classes, and I'm pretty open about that kind of stuff. If you're not happy with a character and you want to change something, we'll make it happen as long as you're reasonable about it. So he wanted to completely change bard classes to some new unearthed arcana, and so we had this halftime ritual where he did this huge concert that ended up giving him these ghostly powers to summon and like commune with the dead. But after that, I had the archdruid, which canonically is able to, he has the Gilead staff that can control blights, right? So I was like,
Mhm.
well, what wrestling move would I have Vince McMahon do? Of course, he makes the blights come up to the cell, to the stage, and they make a giant hell in the cell bone structure out of their like bark and arms. And so now we have a cage match for the final match. And this we have,
Oh.
I dramatize it. A large spike comes out of the middle of it and it's all the way through the hell in the cell. So you have to be on top to throw the person on it for the final sacrifice. And at this point, our players like finish the fight. They kill the other berserker, but they try to do this huge, like essentially like 5-person different illusion magic to make it look like Vince McMahon is stealing the powerful ceremony energy. And they wanted to turn the tide of the whole entire like wrestling show. They're literally buying into it. They're playing along as if it's a real wrestling thing. So our bar or no, our cleric, who's a satyr, jumps on top of the announcer spot and is like, what is that? Vince McMahon has stolen the what a betrayal kind of thing. Like, can you believe the commissioner did this? How dare he? And so now Vince McMahon gets in the fight and he's now fighting people. So now they're fighting an archdruid. And right as they lop off his head, clear like my Loxodon describes how he just eventually gets the killing blow, lops off his head, it flies into the air, and that's when Strahd, who's watching from above, riding Peruvius, which is as written in the module, grabs the head for the crowd and then plummets it back onto the like tries to plummet it back on the spike and eventually gets it. It's this huge hullabaloo of him using his turns. Like it takes like 3 turns for him to finally get the spike as the players keep trying to like destroy the head and keep the body and just try to stop it from happening. But it does eventually happen. And it takes 3 sessions. It's this huge hullabaloo. And let me tell you, it was so much more fun than 10 rounds of chanting that can be interrupted to summon this giant cool monster for them to fight.
And that wouldn't have fit. I mean, I got some questions as to how that could be flavored to make it enjoyable, even in a by the book reading of Curse of Strahd. But that absolutely wouldn't have worked for what you were trying to. Um,
No. I think that in like by the book is it's sad and scary. Like you get the whole you can see the city in the mist on the hill. It's supposed to be eerie, and you find this old berserker axe which gives you +3 to kill tree-based life forms, which is helpful
mhm,
only for that area.
yeah,
I've actually his sense have made that a much better and cooler item for my Loxodon. He is now in charge of like they end up defeating it all. Winter Splinter goes off and the thing is summoned, which actually scares the crap out of all the druids and all of these berserkers who, every year it's been a party. There's not supposed to be a monster. It's just supposed to, it's like it's wrestling. It's supposed to be fake. Everybody knows it's fake, guys,
everybody
except
knows
this
it's
year
fake.
until it's not fake, until the giant monster actually stands up, kicks through the lightning rocks, kills a bunch of druids, and starts walking towards the winery. That's when suddenly things get really real. And it's those moments where my players are also like, oh my God, this is dark. And that was the first time they ever encountered Strahd being like, I'm the land. How I want things to go is going to go, and I'm going to do whatever I can to make it happen. Yes, you may be able to use your little magic to spoil my 6-second turn, but when my 6-second turn comes back around in initiative order, I'm going to keep trying my hardest. And that really, like, one of my players was a little upset about it even. He even goes, what does he say? He goes, I felt like he was going to summon Winter Splinter no matter what we did. And I had to say, him like, well, that was his goal. That's what he wanted to do. And my player's like, "Well, didn't you railroad us?" I'm like, "No. You could have blown up the statue. You could have done a number of things, but you never did. And that's okay. You just didn't see them in the moment." And I think that's one of the things that when players are very much about trying to talk their way through every situation, they lose sight that there's always other options, that there is always like violence is an option in most D&D campaigns, and sometimes people who just want to talk through everything forget that. And I find that they weave themselves this very, very thin thread of a logical plan that if everybody rolls perfect, it will work. But sometimes it takes a lot of rolls, and all it takes is one bad roll to throw all of that plan out the door. And
Absolutely.
it's so common, and I love it because it's chaotic and it's wonderful and it's nuts. But also at the same time, like it makes sense when people and players are a little frustrated in the moment where it's like, oh, I thought our plan was a good plan, and I think it should have worked.
Well, you're walking a line there, I think, with Strahd, because Strahd is, of course, he's a little god of a little world, basically.
Yeah,
And so, as you say, he is used to getting his way. He's tyrannical, and so you want to create like a sense of frustration with the way things are, because he's the big nasty bugbear of a villain who is present from the very beginning, almost of the story.
absolutely.
So it's like, how do you balance that with making sure also, because players don't like to feel like what they do doesn't matter. As you say, that wasn't the case, because there was other things that they could have done, but you want to
Absolutely.
create that frustration without making them so frustrated that they're not having fun anymore. And I feel like that's a fine balance.
It is a fine balance. And I have found that the best way to walk that fine balance is honestly just one, when players are a little complaining, is confront their logic and also point out that there were other options even though they didn't see them. I think almost every conversation I've ever had with that is always shown like, yeah, it's true. Like I could have done that. Well, why didn't you? Well, I didn't think of it in the moment. Well, that's okay. Think of it next time. It's fine. It happened. But also, it's bringing up the point that not every plan that sounds good is going to work. And if you forget even one other NPC or one point in the puzzle or one gear in the machine that you're trying to navigate with this plan, it might go tits up. And if you don't have backup plans or can't mold on the fly, it's okay if it collapses. And if it collapses, let it collapse, but have fun with it or try to have fun with it is the best we can do in a game.
And I think also, as much as we might, and I'm probably as guilty of this as anyone, but as much as we bitch about it, if our plans worked all the time, we'd be miserable. It just
I
there'd
mean,
be no stakes.
yeah,
You know,
exactly. There'd be no stakes.
pretty funny that we're talking about a vampire thing. No stake. All right,
I get it. Haha.
sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. You were
No,
saying.
it's okay. A big like one of my biggest motivations for a lot of my theology also is like that Terry Pratchett type, like built characters that seem like they're humorous in nature, but they also are can be taken seriously. It's I find it hard for myself to play serious characters in general, just because it's gruff, it's hard, and like it's when you're not a serious person, suddenly being Mr. Serious can be it doesn't come off serious all the time. So I try to keep that light, but it helps me make my world unique. That I think a big thing I've learned from reading a lot of his books and like focusing on that is that everything can be threaded together, and people's interactions with one another, characters who interact with one another, leave impressions on one another, and those impressions can affect the world, affect how people react, and affect how people think and know about you. Reputation is something that we don't think about when we're playing video games, generally speaking. It's usually, or if they do, it's, if you do bad things, it goes on a rating, but it's never felt. You don't actually have people, when you meet a person in a town, go, oh, you're the ones who killed the vampires. Oh my god, thank you. I heard about that. Like my kid was telling me that he saw the whole thing. That doesn't happen in a video game, or the opposite of like, aren't you those guys who are supposed to be protecting the town? Like what about those vampires that just killed that guy? Like it's that whole difference if they don't do it or not. And it's been by using that framing of just trying to keep character interactions and keeping honestly rumors spreading and keeping talk going as an active world has really created a lot of turbulence for my characters and players, but also a lot of like openings and doorways and a better way for them to communicate. They're feeling like they're connecting with the world, even though the world is only as deep as they're probing it. But it's trying to create that illusion of everything is flushed out and everything is deep and everything is there on the fly. And a lot of it is just, good DMing and just realizing and just saying stuff with a straight face, even though you're coming up with it seconds before you're saying it. It's difficult, but it really can make Barovia and like I mean any campaign a lot easier and a lot more just feeling real, I really want to focus on and something that makes it fun for me. I don't know about you.
Oh, absolutely. The great strength of tabletop RPGs is just the fluidity of it. No processor known to man can simulate the full realism of countless fully realized individuals bumping together in their own little world, all of the little changes of opinion, their attitudes towards one another. There's nothing that can do that the same way that a human brain can, and that is the
No,
advantage that we are always going to have up until I think probably the computing singularity or whatever.
absolutely. I cannot agree further with that. I think another thing that will help your player has helped my players, and it's a decision I've made in my games that has made a very big world difference, is I roll in front of board for about 99% of my rolls. As a DM, my players see like especially any attack roll by any creature. If we're in combat, almost 99% of rolls are in front, are wide open from the DM screen. Like there's no DM screen. I roll for my characters and they see it and it means I can't pull punches. I can't fake it. I can't, you know what I mean? There's no like, oh, he missed. My players know, like, oh yeah, he has a +6 to hit, and oh, he rolled a 14. Sorry, man, that's a 20. Like,
Mm.
and the tension it has created and the amount of like oh no moments that it has created has been amazing, and it is something that it feels counterintuitive to a lot of games, but I would recommend trying it for anyone who wants to like feel the rush of like as a DM, the actual weight of dice rolls. Oh, like what's the I don't know. There's something about rolling behind a screen and faking a role for the sake of story that I get. I understand why some DMs do it and why people
Yeah.
feel the need to do it, but I will tell you that the rush, the play-in rush, when when you're a player and you roll your dice and you actually like that's the outcome. That feeling, you don't get that as a DM as much.
Hmm.
And if you want that feeling along with your players, roll in front of board. It makes you feel like a player. It's great. I love it.
I think that it probably varies a bit from group to group and from adventure to adventure, but specifically, I think in a Rocky Horror Picture Show and Curse of Strahd type universe, in both of those places,
Mm.
life is cheap.
To allude to something from earlier, the one of the more important reasons I put all of the amusers in Wallachia as well is because I agree life is cheap. Also, players are fickle. People get bored. I wanted to have a large group of ex-adventurers who are stuck in Barovia for players to choose from, or for them to build off of and just say, "Hey, oh yeah, at the bar there was a ex ranger who, so that way if their character dies, we can have someone come in from out of the blue that makes
That's
sense."
true. Yeah, yeah. You've got
Because
like
that
that backup just sitting right there.
Well, you just have an area you have an area that can be a backup generator. Like, I only introduced 3 or 4 of the actual amusers that were at the bar, but you just say, "Yeah, there's a bunch of them around," and you can just say, like, "Oh, yeah," if a character wants to be someone that wasn't there, you can be like, "Oh, yeah, that person was in the bathroom at the time you were there or wasn't in the room," you know? It's these games can be fluid enough and everything the story can be molded around the idea of bringing in any type of character. That's my biggest fear. I don't want my players to be bored, especially with their player or their mechanics or anything else. And I'm not stuck to creating this grand Dios adventure and that has to be narratively perfect. Life isn't narratively perfect. I don't think our games are narratively perfect either.
No, no, of course not. Uh,
And they shouldn't be, especially if you're doing, like, a home campaign, like, you're not recording generally. No one's gonna ever be listening for, like, continuity errors, and, like, it's less pressure as a person. Maybe if you have those players who are keeping track of your crazy homebrew world and are, like, doing all the devout research for you, like, okay, if you have those players, I understand. Maybe you're in a whole different ballgame, but generally speaking, the majority of people I've learned, they let it slide. They're not thinking of it. They just are there to have fun and wanna play. And that's kind of the Curse of Strahd I wanna provide, is something that isn't
yeah.
doom and gloom, something that's fun and funny, and also but serious undertones. Um, I think honestly, the current what we're currently working on, what my players are doing as of right now, which is in the middle of August, is they are dealing with Wallachia. Um, Before I can get into that, I just wanna talk about the big bads in Curse of Strahd are these dark powers that keep Strahd in his dark domain. Well, for my campaign, I've decided that my dark powers are going to be demon lords. I took out
Mhm.
the good old fashioned, not Xander, Tomes and Foes, which is great for if you need demons, demonology, demon lords. I recommend the resource book for anyone out
Yeah,
there.
the dark
Um,
powers are very vague, and they allow you to kind of in the
yep.
book, they're very vague. They allow you to attach whatever you want
Yep.
to, so
And so because Barovia is a demi-plane in the Shadowfell, I figured it was appropriate for demon lords to be have interest in it. So I've taken 5 of the major demon lords that are in the books, and I have each one of them, they are in a huge gambling bet about who can steal the most souls from Strahd, or who can destroy or basically who can torture Strahd the most and take as much from Barovia. They were trying to chop up this demi-plane that is full of souls from they're from he keeps Strahd keeps bringing people in. So there are more souls that have collected to Barovia over the last 400 years that are ripe for the picking from all these adventurers that have been killed. So all these demon lords are infecting certain players and or NPCs and other people to try and have their win. So I have a few of them attempting to talk to players. I have a few of them who are talking to major NPCs, such as the Baron Vargas of Wallachia. He is, the burgomaster of Wallachia. I have him being controlled by Gratz, who is the demon lord of mystery and deception and lies kind of thing. And
Mhm,
and and his whole thing is he's like it's all about pleasure. He's like that god of infinite, like he'll give you everything you need kind of thing. And
mhm.
so makes sense. The Baron of Wallachia, this whole thing is everybody is happy and the happiness is what's going to get strawed away. So once again, we're going to ramp that up to 11. So now he's fanatically obsessed with joy. He wants everyone to be happy. And if you show any sign of dissent, well, you must not be part of his town. So I have a bossing say kind of esque environment happening in Wallachia where anyone who's showing dissent is now first put it to the stocks, and then at night they're brought to this little hidden prison in the lake where they're tortured and like kept there. So I have
Mm.
him. So I have the Festival of the Blazing Sun happen. My players make it back to Vallaki just in time for the Festival of the Blazing Sun, except they don't have enough wine. They weren't even expected to return because let's face it, people leave the town all the time and don't come back. So the Baron had to do something else. And so here we have a perfect example of where the dark and twisted meets this fun and more like surface level environment where I did
Hmm.
the festival of the blazing sun where it was a giant weed festival. I had the baron the
Yep.
Baron has found he was told by Fiona Watcher about this certain type of weed that grows down by the lake. It has been dried, and when you smoke it, it gives you a high euphoria and makes you want to eat very heavily. So I had the whole festival based around that. I had a few games and mechanics, like there was a smoke blowing challenge, and there was a bong, like I had a like the largest 6 foot bong with this huge orc have, and they, I had mechanics where the players are trying to outsmoke the outsmokable kind of thing. And so they're all rolling constitution checks going in circles. And I had the prizes be essentially magic cigars that just have spells attached to them. They won between the five of them, I think 8 or 9 cigars, all with different spells. But the whole festival is supposed to come to a head with this big burning of an effigy, along with this, the Baron's big proclamation, along with the players telling the town about how they defeated Winter Splinter and how they rescued the wine, kind of thing. So that's how they're involved. The ritual, so I had instead of just a giant sun, I had a big baby smoking a joint was what the effigy looked like.
Yep.
But the players took an interest. They knew it was hollow. They had checked it the day before, but they didn't check it during the festival. And what they didn't see is that it had been filled with all of the people that had been taken from the stockades and had been tied up, and they are being waiting there to be sacrificed. And also, on top of that, I have Fiona Watcher, who has working with Strahd, has tainted the logs that start the fire for this ritual that she doesn't know about. But what she knows is that if you smoke the weed, and if you smell the smoke of these certain logs, then they will turn you into a crazed zombie. So the goal of this whole encounter was is if the players aren't able to find any of these threads, these mysteries that are going on behind the scene, it will be the fire will be lit by one of the players. The people in the crowd will start making con saves, and the ones who fail them will become berserker zombie like cannibals who will be starting to attack other townspeople. But at the same time, the Burgermaster's plan of summoning a demon is going to go through too, where he's going to sacrifice these lives to Gratz, and suddenly there's going to be a high CR demon in the middle of the crowd that's going to be eating people brain souls to Gratz. So now I have this huge chaos wave of it when it was very funny and very fun. And oh my goodness, look at we have this wheat festival. How hilarious! To oh my god, townspeople are eating each other. We can we the moral implications of is this permanent? Can we kill the townspeople? Should we just subdue them while also dealing with this demon?
You got the ultimate munchies.
Exactly. And so well, and yeah, exactly. At the ultimate munchies. And that was kind of the joke I was thinking of is that, yeah, it heightens your sense of,
Cool.
like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, the weed, it heightens your sense of appetite. And so the smoke enhances that and makes you eat people. And so I had like Soylent Green jokes planned and all these other things planned. And they ended up, I will say, my players found Fiona Watcher's plan and decided to remove the wood. Like they showed the Burgermaster that when they light the wood, that skulls, like it makes spooky skulls, the smoke becomes all scully and weird. And they didn't even realize that. They didn't even find out that it made people into zombies. They were just like, yeah, look at this wood. When you light it on fire, it makes spooky skull smoke, and that's going to scare your townspeople. And the Burgermaster's like, I can't believe the betrayal, and he takes Fiona Watcher off by Isaac and has Isaac go deal with her accordingly. And the players don't know what that means yet, but of course it means something dark. And I'm thinking of having Isaac kill Fiona Watcher as like it's because it's this whole plan has gone off the rails at this point. I think that's probably the dealing with it. But anyway, they figured it out.
You're kind of jerking it back and forth over the line between the the whimsy and the extremely dark.
And that's the thing is that it in a world of madness and a world of this idea of like these heightened emotions, of course it's going to be dark under the surface. Like, yeah, Strahd's world is one of fun that he controls, that he kind of controls the narrative in, and it's entertaining, but it's still dark, it's still depressing. There's still sad things going on. And like you missed a bunch of people being captured and now they're gone. And now there's a demon eating people. And what are you going to do? And yes, I know the music is Fashion Zombies by the Aquabats, and I know you're in the middle of this combat and it's fun, but what are the moral implications? And
Yep.
I'm really enjoying asking that as a DM in Barovia. I think Curse of Strahd at its core is it is a module that is supposed to just make your players make moral decisions. Is a life worth living? Am I okay with taking these lives? Who do I protect? Who do I not protect? And why do I protect them? And what are we doing here? What is your character motivation to get out of this land? And is it to help people or is it to help themselves? And how are they going to do it? And I love to ask every session I get to ask those questions indirectly.
I think also Rocky Horror Picture Show, very, very fun and goofy on the surface, but when you start looking into the themes are very dark. The themes are, without the extremely catchy, quotable moments and stuff like that. It's actually
No, and
quite
absolutely.
dark.
And realistically, I think at its core, Ravenloft is the same way, especially with all the new
Hmm.
additions that have just come out with it. It's it can be it looks fun on the surface, but when you start looking into the stories and some of the back lore of these characters, you're like, "Oh, this is sad." It's not even like, "Oh, ha, 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 it's sad." It's like, "Oh, this is just kind of sad." And
It's genuinely
because
sad.
I feel really bad for this NPC now, this fake character, and I'm really not okay with this happening to them. I will say one of the things I don't like about Ravenloft and like is it's written very homogeneous. It's all humans, and they're all supposed to be gothic white people, and
Yeah.
like, I instantly threw that out. I would recommend that to any DM running Curse of Strahd 2, that it makes your players not feel like they belong when I have a Loxodon and a Satyr
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I had a couple elves and, like, a half elf and a drow just walking around and there's only humans around. Yeah, that's gonna be really it's weird and uncomfortable, and it's just boring for NPC. So I've changed around a ton of the races of a lot of NPCs, especially the Vistani. Um,
Mhm.
Making more Loxodons in this world has been a blast. I think that's hilarious, and especially since my Loxodon character is all about re-talking and like connecting with other Loxodons. And I think catering to your characters in that way can really be helpful.
It's this whole thing is great. I kind of wish I was there for that campaign.
You're not the first person has told me that.
I'm pretty sure that you got a lot. I feel like you must have gotten a lot of eyes on you for posting on that initial thread. I see you on occasion posting about it. So
It is,
on
yeah,
Twitter.
it's hard because I have a few players that follow me on Twitter very hard, so I can't do any reveals or just talk in the past, like, oh, once they cover
Yeah,
area.
you got to be kind of mum about it. But just how marketable, how marketable is Rocky Horror Picture Show Curse of Strahd
Oh,
though?
so marketable. It makes me kinda wanna go back and maybe do, like, a more thorough, writing of it for people to have access to it.
That would be fantastic. Sorry, little time check here. We are at a little bit over an hour. We've been talking. Wondering if there were major things that you wanted to get into in addition to what we've already talked about.
Um, I don't know, generally anything major. I really haven't had a chance to go through about what I've been doing. I I think a lot. I know. I guess I could talk about how like my philosophy, like my DM philosophy, as far as how I write things and how I go about this, and kind of walking that line. I can go into that.
Sure. I also have my D100 list of
Oh
questions.
yeah, I would love to do one of those too. Two D10s? Are you kidding me? I'm rolling a D100 dice on Google. Decent. And I got a 43.
43. Okay. Okay, this one is not attributed, which probably means it's one of the ones that I put on there.
Nice.
What would you say is the lowest of the low that your party has experienced in this game?
Mm, the lowest of the low.
Yeah, their darkest moment.
So far, I think they're darkest moment was definitely when Winter Splinter, like when Winter Splinter was finally summoned, just because it was this huge, just like this long bout of them rolling against fate and just trying to them using every little thing in the book to try and get Strahd, only for him to just on his turn do what he needed to do. And he didn't take, I didn't cheat, I didn't take any other actions, but it was just within the game economy, them seeing how hard it was to actually stop him from doing anything that they didn't want to do was frustrating. So I think that was one of their lower points, but honestly, I don't think they're there yet. I think the town, what just happened, is it's a low point for them. It's like one of their more, if they failed to figure out something kind of crucial, and now there's a big issue. A lot of people just died. This is the first time a ton of people have died in front of them. I think that is a big part of it. Also, oh, Father Lucian um, ended up killing himself. I had him, hang himself after all was said and done.
It happened in our game too, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, once you kill his son, and if you kill his son in front of him, it's what the game decrees happen, and I agreed with it, and it's just neat. It's true. And it's a dark moment. It really sets the tone in the first chapter of Barovia. So I think that would be their lowest moment so far.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, that's some pretty low stuff. And from what you were talking about before, it seems like there was uh it seems like the Winter Splinter thing kind of upset a little
It
bit.
did. I mean, it upset myself too. As a DM, you want your players having fun, and I had to go back and be like, well, was it like I had to really go back and break it down and be like, and realize that, okay, no, this is the thread that they chose to go down. It was very complicit on certain dice rolls happening, and they missed one, and so that's what happened. But ultimately, it did turn around to them fighting Winter Splinter, and then them having to actually do this other part in the next session, and then they defeated Winter Splinter. So they needed that low moment at the end of a session to really come back and fight in at the next session. And I think because they were victorious, and also in their fight to Winter Splinter, they decided Strahd offered to help them defeat it. Strahd was like, "I'll even help you defeat him. Only
Huh,
you have to come to dinner," kind of thing. The
he is so
only
inscrutable. Yeah, wow.
he's like, "I only wanted to see if this would work. I don't care what happens to this creature at this point." He's like, "If it destroys the winery, that's fine. If I get to fight with it, that's fine too." And they denied it. They're like, "No, we don't want your help. Like, we know we're invited to dinner. We'll come when we're good and ready," kind of thing. So they're very tongue in cheek and coy, but they don't take his deals, which I like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's a challenge. It's a defiance of Strahd as a person. So.
No, absolutely. And
Mhm.
finding that motivation is difficult sometimes because you also need to thread it into the whole he's trying to find the love of Irina, and what that means in this campaign and this version I'm not too sure yet. I'm still kind of trying to come up with different ideas of how a Rocky Horror version of this campaign would go about seducing Irina and getting Strahd his way. And I think that's something that I still need to explore and really flush out because it's not quite apparent of what he would do. And I think that's something that makes this a fun experience for myself to write, is just trying to get into those character head and realize what is their true motivation and what are they trying to actually accomplish in this.
And then how do you hook the themes from one up to the themes with the other?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, I have some other areas in the campaign that are going to be very thematic and fun on the surface, but once again, that's going to be an ongoing thing. So there is the Temple of Argahast, or the Castle of Argahast, which is that it's an old ancient dragon, and all of its fighters are now dead, and they're revenants, and the castle's full of revenants and all that other jazz, right? Are you familiar with that part of the campaign?
Oh, it's been a good long while, but I believe so.
It's A-okay. So either way though, but it's a dungeon slog. They're revenants, and they're all undead, and it's kind of like this undead army. Well, they've already met a revenant on the road via a random encounter. And so I decided that on their way to this temple, or on the way, if they ever go there, they're going to start meeting undead and people, and it's going to be a Grateful Dead concert because that's who the art halls are. It's the Grateful Dead. And so that's the change I'm going to make there. I'm really hoping. I think Strahd is going for the crystals to try and make something else come alive. Like Winter Splinter was a cool thing to make animate, but the power of the crystal of the Wizard of Winery, apparently, if they can make things alive, such as Baba Yaga's cat or Baba Yaga's hut, what else can they make alive? And so I want Strahd to explore that. But my goal is eventually maybe we can have a Gundam type fight doing something, you
Ah,
know? Uh,
that's outstanding.
yeah, right. And there's just so many opportunities of what would these NPCs really do with all this weird magic, weird power in this weird world. And it's pretty fun. Oh, and I will say that my I don't think my players have realized what dream pies are made of, and so that has been
They
ongoing.
haven't yet?
No,
Oh
they've
my
they've
god.
skipped all of it. They actually their dream pies have like one they've Strahd has used the dream pie to talk to our bard. A demon has talked to our sorcerer and has convinced our sorcerer and has even given him a boon, but our sorcerer thinks it's just the source of his wild magic power and it's not a demon who's just trying to manipulate him. And like there's some long end game complications with that demon lord's plan, and I have that all set up in the background. And once again, it's the what you think you know is not what you always know, especially in Barovia. Not everything is what it seems. Not everything is what it is on the surface. When you pull back the veneer, when you pull back the layers, something darker and more hideous and more devious is supposed to be underneath. And so that is a theme I'm not losing and I refuse to lose.
Absolutely, it should be that. Honestly, I feel like a lot of campaigns should have a lot of, what you see is not what you get. The
Yes.
things are not always what they seem, but especially in Barovia.
No, absolutely. Barovia is the essential that.
Would you like to roll for another question?
Yeah, I'll roll one more. I got about 12 minutes left, and then I gotta.
You got about 12 minutes left? Okay, so we'll do that. We'll do a wrap up. Okay.
Sounds good. I rolled a 56.
56. Okay. All right. This one comes from Gay Goblin 99. Do you go for plot first, players second, or do you wait for your players' backstories to form a plot?
Oh, so I guess the way I always go with this is that in my session 0, I always have the players have to discuss how they know each other and how their lives are interacting. And so I
Oh, I
guess
should have my players do that more often.
Oh, I mean, that's how they're the ones who came up with the whole moving company thing and all of that jazz. That was all my players, which I don't want to do that heavy lifting. So as far as plot forward first, I mean, generally I have regions and things that are happening. I like to think I don't like the players being the Destin's chosen one, such as like Skyrim makes the Dragonborn type thing. I like creating worlds where things are going to happen and they're going to happen a certain way. And if the players, as soon as the players start interacting with the world, that certain way starts to change depending on how they interact with the world. So I'm very much like let the players come up with what they want to, especially if we're doing like a heavy homebrew setting, which I've done before. Then it's off the wall. It's I always just ask my players that they let me maybe talk to them about their character or their ideas and work with each other off of them. So it's all collaborative
Mhm.
storytelling, and I'm a big believer in pushing that, especially with letting players that creative freedom to try and do it. I do have a rule of depending on what uh, level we're starting off with, which is you get 1 page of maximum 1 page of backstory per level that your character's starting at.
Okay, all right. That's fair because sometimes you get a character who starts off at level 5, but they kind of act like they're level 1. And you've got to be like, you've already been through like a lost mine of Fandelver's worth of
Yeah,
adventures.
you've seen
So,
some shit. Like
yeah.
you're level 5, you're starting off. So yeah, tell me, you have up to 5 pages. And generally I've never had anyone who's been like, well, that wasn't enough.
Yeah. No, fair enough. I mean, personally, I only start with a few easy sentences because mostly I like a little basic history and just one or two quirks that I can role play, one or two personality traits that are fairly easy to role play and
When I'm
use to
playing
define the character.
the same way. I would like minimal backstory unless the DM asks for it, and I would like my history to be made via the character. I think that's the way to go.
Exactly. It gets told in the telling.
Yeah, exactly. I want the story to be made, not already happened. Not to mention, I like characters with growth.
Yeah, character growth, that's essential. That's why we play the game. Okay. So did you have anything else? Any closing remarks? I believe you had mentioned something about your DMing philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. So my DM philosophy comes from a Matt Colvian, or for those who know, Matt Colville is online DM,
Love
very
that guy.
famous. Most people love that guy. I was trained by watching his videos, and the big thing that my philosophy has taken from that is one, make it fun. Don't Action economy is important as well, but and the rules are important as well, but ultimately fun mechanics are what make a fun game. And so don't be bogged down by the book when things seem sluggish, like change it so it's not sluggish and just really focus on that I want to say focus on having fun, but focus on good pacing. And I think that's the one of the most critical parts of my DM philosophy is just if you can keep good pacing throughout your entire session, you will have engaged players, you will have engaged people, you will have fun narrative stories. And that engagement and that good pacing comes from making sure that your world is dynamic, knowing what is going on, and just having an understanding of what mechanics are actually at play. Because when you have to stop to look things up, or it can really slow your pacing, making the calls on the fly or making logical calls on the fly have helped me immensely. And so for the DMs out there who are just starting or for who have been feeling stale as well, make sure as a DM you're having fun too. It's so important. I cannot tell you how many DMs I talk to who are like they're just bored of their own worlds, and that's you, then change it. Just do something different if you need to.
DM's a player too. I know it
Yeah.
gets said countless times on social media, but it is it is very much true.
Yes, we're here to play a game. Unless you're recording for something more professional, which I understand some people out there are,
Yeah.
that's a whole different ballgame. But if you're at home playing with friends, playing with people, make sure that you are having fun and that the way that you're having fun is not dependent on other people also like ruining or taking away from their fun either. It's about that balance. But
Hmm.
yeah, listen to your players. Good communication is key, and I think just make sure that the clock is always ticking, is the phrasing Colville always uses, and I think it's a good one. If you make your world dynamic and make sure that the clock is always ticking, depending on even if the characters are in a place or not, it will feel real. You'll have engagement, and you'll have a blast. Also, as far as like making it fun for yourself, take your favorite themes, take your favorite pop icons and things that you love and that your players will reference and like look at and throw them into your game. Make them campy, make them punny, and have fun. Vince McMoon was one of the most fun NPCs I've ever played, and it was supposed to be an arch druid. And why not? I never thought in my entire life I would spend an 3 hours looking up wrestling quotes to write down to have NPCs yell at players, but here I am immersing myself in this whole culture I'm not even familiar with, but I know a few of my players are, and it went over amazingly. So, but yeah,
The
you can,
difference between
yeah,
my druidic brother, and yes, my druidic brother.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Druids as pro wrestlers was not something I was expecting out of this. I also want to take just a second. I was thinking about it before, but you were on such a roll. I didn't want to interrupt you. In
No,
fact, actually, this is by far the easiest interview I've ever had to do. You are on top of it, but I just wanted to commend you for bringing in things that are not explicitly associated with Rocky Horror Picture Show, but which nevertheless makes so much sense to be in this universe and still have that same flavor. Professional wrestling being one of them, particularly like your 80s style, super campy.
yeah,
And yeah, so it feels like it fits, even though, maybe it doesn't make sense logically, but it makes sense like emotionally.
thematically, yeah,
I think
no, it has,
thematically, yeah, that makes sense.
and it's once again wrestling. For like WWE is wrestling. It's a form of entertainment that is about deception, about like lack of reality, and like it's not what it seems on the surface. It can be scripted sometimes and other stuff, but it has that same, it's in the same vein of entertainment as that Rocky Horror. Like you said, it all feels campy and over the top. And there are so many things in our world that are in the same vein that, like, I don't want to say there are so many things that are Rocky Horror, but there are. And a good, like I said, like I'm doing a whole thing as a Grateful Dead homage with heady grilled cheeses in the lines on the way there. But I can't think of anything that is more over the top than, you know, the 1980s, 70s Grateful Dead tour,
Mhm.
Walking
Your
Dead
glam
tour,
style.
like
Yeah.
literally referred to as like the roaming dead. Like, of course, I'm gonna have my zombie castle of roaming soldiers be the roaming dead. Of course, like it just there are so many little puzzle pieces that just keep fitting in, and I'm
So many
excited to
things you can put in there with a wink and a nod.
Oh, I'm so
Yeah.
excited to keep writing up the Amber Temple is going to be a very fun little like thing to change up as well. And there's just so many little parts of this campaign that are bring me constant joy to change. And it also makes it so when my players, if they do read ahead or do try to metagame a little bit, it really keeps them on their toes because they don't know what's happening.
Once they've learned that you're messing with it even a little bit, they know that they can no longer rely on
Yeah.
some sort of insider knowledge.
Yeah, and I don't think they are. My players are generally not, but that doesn't mean
No.
this group won't or another group will. Anyone who wants to do this, please steal my idea, have a blast with it. Play rock and play Strahd like this, you know?
I admit I was driving in the car with my wife and I was telling her about this interview and I started doing the voice too. I'm not
It's
gonna lie.
exactly, and it's once you start doing it for Strahd, it's really hard not to. Um,
Tim Curry. It's such a perfect idea for a Strahd.
yeah.
Uh,
Well,
um,
for people who want to find my work out there, you can find me on Instagram at infntealchemics, spelled just normally, and on Twitter, it's infinite but without the vowels, so INFNTE alchemics, and I'm hoping it can be like just added to the show notes or whatnot. But yeah, come take a look at some of my art. I have a website that's on its way. I make very realistic metal devices and magic items for cosplay, for campaigns, for items for your homebrew world. And I also make smoking accessories as well that are Dungeons and Dragons and TTRPG themed. So yeah,
nice. You can come get your winter splinter there on, you know.
absolutely.
Emailed questions, comments, or interview requests can go to sohowwasgame@gmail.com. The intro music is Through the Woods We Ran by Vinsvept. The special music is Mr. Wilson Visits by Mary Riddle. Thanks for listening.
Patience.